Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kyocera Stay Connected sessions. I'm Jacob Palathingal, and I'll be hosting today's session. Look, last few months have been extremely turbulent times for people around the globe. Now, unless you've been living in Mars, everyone around you have been affected. You've been affected. I have, and one group that's been affected the most is our corporates or businesses around the world. They've had to adapt, and literally overnight, where they've had to shift their staff or workforce to a home environment overnight. Now, this came with significant challenges, and things are coming around now where people have started moving back into their office environments, or there's a mixture happening. So today we want to talk about the implications around that. I've got today with us Bill Christoforou. Bill is the senior product manager for Kyocera Office Print. Bill's been in the industry for a while. He's been around technology when we talked about paperless office, and we're back to paper-filled offices in print. So Bill's got a lot of credentials behind him, and Bill will be joining us to talk about this. To start off, Bill, if we can, how do we define this future workplace? How do we define future workplace? And I guess more importantly for us, what role does print have when it comes to this future workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that introduction, Jacob. Appreciate it. Look, the future of work is something that I have been involved in, or I have been, involved in many discussions around the future of work for some time now. And I think depends on who you ask, but largely it kind of seems to center around two key concepts, and that is that it's about decentralizing a workforce. And meaning essentially that individuals can be productive from wherever they are, as opposed to having to be in a centralized location like an office to be productive. And that means being able to provide them the technology and the know-how of how to be able to achieve that. And secondly, critical to that is being able to achieve a what we call a blended environment. So a blended environment is really the boundaries really start to blur between what is a work environment, a dedicated work environment, and a non-work environment. And a blended environment will allow somebody to be able to be productive, once again, very well, but will also be used for other things as well. So, your home office, for example, is a good example of that.
Yeah, of course. So when you talk about this new blended environment, what sort of challenges are we going to be facing? I mean, there's obviously we all know there'll be challenges, and what have businesses been facing in the past few weeks, and what will we face in the next coming weeks with this transition happening?
Yeah. Look, I think as an industry and even as a society, we probably planned on getting involved or transitioning to remote working or working from home, or in a very staggered and in a very measured way. And unfortunately, the last few months have thrust us into that world in a far shorter space of time. So a lot of companies have had to in fact bring on potentially plans that they may have originally planned to roll out over the course of many months and possibly even years, and accelerate them into the space of 2 or 3 months. So we've seen a lot of businesses have to move to a flexible working environment or a working from home environment in a very short space of time. Deloitte have published a report that says that up to 4 out of every 5 workers globally has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And while not all of them may be office workers, that's still a huge amount of workers that are now, working from home as opposed to working out of an office.
Yeah. So what's going to happen in the future? Can we return to work as before? And I guess more importantly, what's going to be the role of print in this coming future workplace? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jacob. I think, look, again, as an industry, and even I think even as a society, we probably have to get used to some level of uncertainty for the next few months. I don't think there's anything that we can plan on with too much certainty. Slowly, things seem to be getting back to normal, but we may actually end up taking a couple of steps back before we take a few more steps forward. That's entirely possible. So, working from home. And regardless of what happens, I think around COVID-19, working from home will probably be now a far more relied upon working method than it used to be.
It's going to be kind of the norm, isn't it? What you're trying to say?
I think so, yeah. You know, this new normal that people keep talking about, right? This new
Mm.
normal. Um, and I think companies will want to mitigate risk. So they'll want to be able to keep that ability to be able to flick that switch back on at any time and be able to have that productivity level not nosedive as we saw, in potentially at, sort of around the late stages of February and early March.
Mm.
So yeah, sort of getting used to that. From a print perspective, we need to sort of innovate, and there's certain this crisis, but even before this, we've been, as an industry, we've been sort of thinking around how to innovate and how to move on and how to diversify our services and our offerings.
Mm.
And I think for us, again, this is going to bring the whole thing forward, and it will kind of, in a sense, force us to bring a lot of these innovations and a lot of the stuff that's kind of been waiting in the wings,
Yeah,
and bring it
almost
to
fast
the
forward
fore.
everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. So look, I think there's sort of 5 key areas that I think we can really focus on right now as an industry to, keep the wheels rolling, so to speak. One of them is really addressing and providing secure print home solutions. So I think that's probably the one that's most obvious to most of us, which is a lot more people working from home right now. In the past, they may have relied on a consumer-based device, which is really not going to cut it for a lot of professionals. And just being out there with the right offers, the right promotions, and the right sort of products to be able to achieve that. And Kyocera has a huge range in that field, so we're well equipped to sort of take advantage of that, or address that need. Secondly, there's the cloud-enabled digital workflow services. That's going to be really critical as well. People working from home will be able to interact with office systems quite seamlessly. So again, that's something that companies like Kyocera and others in our industry can assist with. So that's a critical area for us. Moving ahead, in order to achieve that, supporting cloud print infrastructure. So a lot of our customers don't have the actual infrastructure or don't have the capability to look at cloud solutions. So that's another area where we can actually assist in terms of setting up that environment for them and helping them through that transformation.
Mm.
The next area is looking at expanding our device as a service offerings. So we're getting into the space now where we really want to focus on things like Office in a Box. Customers,
Awesome.
customers of ours, especially in the corporate space, will want to be able to provide on-demand access to their staff for working from home or working remotely. So that's where companies like ours can step in and say, "Yep, we can make the right hardware and the right tools available to you for a limited amount of time over a certain period of time, for you to be able to provide that working environment to your staff, and then simply return it at the end of that period." And then lastly, I think touchless technology, for obvious reasons, is going to be a big one. A lot of customers will be now looking at companies like ours and asking, well, how can we make these products that are based around a lot of sort of physical interaction? How can we now transition those to be more around, more touchless and so-called safer to use? And there is already technology in place, like our apps and our remote connection apps and things like that that give users the ability to control our devices remotely,
Oh, yeah.
and essentially meaning they don't have to walk up to it and press any buttons. So
Which is very
uh,
important these days. Yeah, fair
yeah,
point.
absolutely, absolutely. So then, how do we further develop into that area, and how do our dealers and partners also capitalize on that?
You, look, great points, but you've touched quite a lot or quite often on this whole working remotely or working from home scenario. Now, businesses and people are going to do that more and more, or are doing that already for that matter. What do people need to do, or what do businesses need to do so that they continue to remain productive, especially from a technology standpoint and from a print standpoint?
Yeah, I think a lot of small businesses will need to start thinking more and more about their backbone technology. So being able to literally make uh, uh, employees be able to connect remotely. So basic things like VPN and sort of data backup and recovery, and that's more in the IT space, and Kyocera can actually help with that. So more than happy to have discussions on that front. But from a hardware perspective, that home office environment really is critical, and I think it's easy to overlook. So if we look at the IT side of things aside, obviously you need to have a decent computer with some decent processing capability, etc., and a decent internet connection, of course. But then if we look at the printing space, you really can't understate the importance of a specialized device,
Oh,
uh, meaning that it really is head and tails above anything that you would buy at a retailer at a retail level, both from a longevity and really from a security perspective, especially.
sure, that's an interesting point. That's, I guess, quite a commonly asked question, right? Specialized printing you talk about. What's stopping me from, or why wouldn't I just go down to the closest retailer down the road and just pick the cheapest printer off the shelf, and we've got a home office perfectly fine printer. Why wouldn't I do that? What's the difference between that versus a specialized printer?
Yeah, yep. Look, again, that's an easy trap to fall into because it's a very simple, very cheap option in terms of that initial outlay. Your retail level printer will usually be in the order of about 50, anywhere from 50 to about $200. But even say with the $200, with that sort of upper limit, you're still looking at about 500 prints per cartridge of ink. Whereas with a comparable specialized device, you're going to see roughly, even sort of 10 times that amount. So from an interruption perspective, literally having to go out and get yourself more cartridges and more ink or toner, whatever it happens to be, that's going to happen a lot less.
Loss of production.
And
Yeah. Right.
yeah, and you're also going to find that per print, that cost is going to be much higher on a consumer level device than it is on a specialized device because they just run a lot more efficiently. The other factor is, of course, longevity, and these consumer devices are just not built to print, dozens or hundreds of prints per week, whereas a specialized device really is. So you're going to see that device degrade really, really fast. And then lastly, the thing I really want to point out, and we can't underestimate this at all, is the security aspect. It's okay if you're printing, kids' homework and sort of other relatively benign sort of documents from home, but once you're printing work documents, which then have many security and potentially implications around the security and privacy laws, you really need to consider a strong security strengthened device, if you like. So something that's not going to make it very simple for external intrusion into that device via a network, which a printer can certainly be very much a weak point in any network, and something that will protect the data that's stored on that device as well.
Sure. Look, that's extremely interesting, Bill. I guess just to recap our conversation. So what you're saying is we're heading into an environment where there's going to be essentially what you've got termed as blended environment where there'll be people working from offices, home, or doing both at the same time. So businesses have a long road to sort of adapt to that challenge. I mean, they're kind of forced in that way, and they've gone down that track, but that's going to be the new norm. So that's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
And from a print world, what you're saying is, look, we'll have to adapt to this new environment where people are working from home, and how do we provide solutions to them? And that could be cloud, or that could be device as a service, as you talked about. And I guess you also touched on those main points of not just having the cheapest printer off the shelf. It's about understanding the capabilities of those printers, and considering factors like the total cost of ownership of that printer, total
Correct.
considering reliability, longevity. So yeah, I guess that whole picture is quite important when it comes to that remote working place. So look, that's quite comprehensive. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much, Bill, for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant to sort of look at what will be the future of work, and then I guess the role of print in that future of work. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jacob.